Hello and welcome to Gardener's Island, and happy birthday to Trevor. Let's go check out his garden.
Yeah, these ranunculus are ranunculus. 50 bouquets. 50 bouquets. It's my 50th birthday today. Gonna pick 50 bouquets to give away to the beautiful people of Pender Island. Yeah, whites. What else do we need over there? We got the salmon, pink. We're doing pretty good, hey? Well, hello. Today's my 50th birthday, and we're still in a pandemic. We're still, in this lockdown world that we live in. And last year I gave away 49 bouquets of flowers for my birthday, beginning of the pandemic, as a gift to the community of Pender Island, because we have an abundant garden full of flowers this time of year. And it was nice to share, especially during the beginning of the pandemic. And then now that we're still in the pandemic, I thought, oh my goodness, it's still to be so perfect to do the same. And so this morning, my two boys and I, Jonah and Mateo, helped put together 50 bouquets of flowers, mostly of our nice ranunculus, which is blooming heavily right now. And we got these nice glass jars, and we're giving that as a gift to the community. As something special to be reminded of how beautiful life can be, and everything's going to be okay.
Thanks, Trevor, and to all those who picked up one of those gorgeous bouquets. We'll tour our friend Roz's permaculture-inspired garden, and then show you how we planted these asparagus back in April. But first, let's take a trip down to the Conservancy, and then plant some native plants here on our own property.
So they're adapted to the Southern Gulf Islands environments, so that's nice. If you get them from larger nurseries, sometimes they come from further away. You don't know where the provenance of the plants that you're getting. So so that's really important. That's why we've been working with them, as well as Sanish native plants, which are also sort of adapted to this area. And they all, they tend not to collect from the wild because, you know, that would be damaging to the ecosystem. So they start with wild stock that they've collected locally, but then they propagate from those. And they bring in, you know, several different plants that they collect so that they have the genetic variation, but then they propagate, you know, within the plants that they have in the nursery. So they don't, you know, they're not constantly out there digging things up in the wild. Because of the overpopulation of deer, there's more browsing pressure than they can normally sustain. So the ones that we have that say deer resistant usually means they can survive some level of browsing, but not necessarily the level of browsing we see in a lot of pender areas, especially in Magic Lake, where there's just too many deer. And they're so hungry that they're eating things that they're not supposed to or they shouldn't be, you know, so the herbivory is an issue in terms of why there's not more of these species just in the wild. Of course, the native pollinator diversity is a concern. So native pollinators will feed on non-native species, non-native flowering plants, but they prefer native species. And so you'll find that studies have shown that the native pollinators will spend more time on the native species, even when they start to reduce in abundance. Whereas things like honeybees that are native will just visit whatever's most abundant. So they tend to kind of just, they're not as selective, but our native species actually prefer the things that they co-evolved with. So that's a good reason to plant native species, because it supports that huge diversity of native pollinators that we have, which in turn then supports the biodiversity of birds and everything else. You know, one of the things we've brought in is hardhack, which is pink spirea, which is the native spirea. And it's very similar to buddleia, butterfly bush, in terms of its flower shape. But it's being native, it actually allows things like tiger swallowtails, which will visit either flower, but if they lay their eggs on a buddleia plant, their caterpillars can't feed on those leaves. So it actually affects their ability to reproduce. Whereas hardhack and some of these other species will attract those pollinators, and they will also be able to feed on them as larvae. So it's just that whole life cycle. There are little details that you just don't even know because they just co-evolved, and we just know so little about them that, you know, just keeping those communities intact just ensures that we maintain that biodiversity.
So I found a bunch of plants at the Pender Conservancy native plant sale that I've been wanting to grow. And one of the reasons I think it's super important to grow native plants is a lot of the native plants that would be here are getting eaten by the deer, and we have no predators for the deer. So the deer just kind of, they eat all sorts of things they normally wouldn't eat. We have a protected space in here from them, and this is a really wet zone in our yard, so it's kind of hard to figure out how else to garden in this area other than with a lot of native plants, which in our coastal region there's a lot of them that love wet, shady spots. I'm gonna put in the salmon berry. I love eating salmon berries. We try and harvest a lot. I got this little ground cover. This is the false lily of the valley, and it should really spread around here nicely. I got, this one is a black twinberry, and I got two from the Conservancy. And it's called black twinberry because it gets black double berries after its flower, which I believe the birds really love. They get to be about 10 or 11 feet tall, maybe a little more than that. I've seen them on the coast of, like on the west coast, and they're like massive, but I don't know if they would get to be that tall in this region. We have a little bit of a drier region. But I'm hoping it'll just really fill in and be quite beautiful. I consider it my responsibility to make sure that there's habitat here for all the animals and insects that were here before we were here. And I'm really grateful to places like conservancies on Maine and Galliano and the Pender Conservancy that are growing and distributing specifically only native plants for restoration projects. I'm so grateful that you're doing what you're doing and making this available for people like me. So this area of the garden is much more sunny and open, but it's also still got very wet soil underneath. So I've been slowly sheet mulching it over the last 2 years to try and build soil up on top of the wet, like it's just super wet and mucky underneath, pretty heavy clay soil. So I've picked plants for this area that like a more sunny area. Like this one is the evergreen huckleberry, which has super tasty blueberries all over it. And this is the hardhack. So I picked up 2 hardhacks because I really appreciated what Erin told me about them when we were talking to her. And they really like to be in more open. I've seen them on the roadside actually quite a bit. So open, sunny, but wet feet as far as I understand. So I'm going to plant one right here because it will get really tall, and this is kind of the edge of our property, so hopefully it will hide some of the fencing, stuff like that. So you see how this soil is doing. I put cardboard down here last year and leaves mulch, and I've put down compost and layers of manure. I think it'll like this spot. It gets these beautiful kind of plumes of pink fuzzy flower heads on them. Just planted a bunch of natives in my garden, and now we've come to Roz's to look at some her garden, which is based around a bunch of various permaculture ideas. And the first thing I noticed right inside her garden gate is this black twinberry bush, which is really exciting because of course mine is very little and doesn't really show much, doesn't have flowers on it. So these are the little flowers. There's 2 little yellow flowers, and each of those turns into a black berry, which hasn't happened yet. just before the flowers come out. And it gets to be huge. So I hope where I planted 2 of mine, there's going to be enough space for them. One of the most useful plants in permaculture, and in my garden I just love kale, and it has so many uses. It's obviously fantastic to eat, and it's drought tolerant, so you can eat it all through the summer, and frost tolerant, so it can eat it all winter. It is also really great to have in the spring because it just kind of takes off in the spring and provides really good bee forage in the early spring when they're looking for some nectar and pollen in the spring. It's a really great cover crop. So we plant it in like July or August, and it just overwinters and keeps the soil alive through the winter. And then when it's, like spring and time to put in new crops, there's absolutely no weeds in here. So I can just pull the kale out and there's no weeds, and I can just put my new crops pretty much straight in there with a bit of, you've got to amend the soil again with some fertilizer, but it's just a really great cover crop. Keeps the soil alive, feeds the bees, feeds us, and it also feeds chickens, because the chickens need lots of greens, and in the wintertime there's not much green for them to eat, so we're actually able to harvest lots of kale and feed the chickens all winter too. And you get these really nice almost, well, it's kind of gone to flower now, but you get these nice almost like broccoli heads on it, so you can harvest these heads too and put them in salad or steam it or whatever. These, all of this is edible. The entire plant is great to eat.
Should we take some to the chickens?
We should
Take a bunch?
some to the chickens.
Okay.
Should I leave as much soil in the ground or on the bed?
Yeah.
And
I guess the chickens maybe like some soil.
some of the roots can stay in there too.
Oh, okay.
Feeds the soil. All right, chickens. More kale. You good girl. Yeah. Good girl. Yeah, I just love chickens. They're so useful. They're just like, they're so easy to look after too, Like they're such an easy animal. If you're gonna have an animal in a garden or farm, it's just chickens are the easiest thing. And they're just so rewarding, and they give so much, and just great value. And beautiful.
Yeah.
Good girl.
Okay.
So yeah, we have this 1 acre property, and it was basically all blackberries, swamp, and lots of long grass. We had about 2 mature fruit trees on the whole property, and that was about it. So it was kind of overwhelming to figure out what to do with it and how to put elements in place and how to
put all the pieces together. So I needed some guidance, some inspiration, and that's where permaculture came in. And so I took a permaculture design course, and it's a very systematic design process for thinking holistically about the whole ecosystem and the whole ecology of the property, and trying to figure out what is the best thing to do with that particular piece of land. So the first step is actually just to create a basic, very simple map of what is present in terms of major trees, major buildings. And then the next step is to think about what elements are happening in nature. So where is the sun coming from? What's your aspect? What's your drainage? What are your views, and what are your constraints? So this is looking at the solar aspect, the main drainage patterns, and just to take all of that big picture stuff into account. And then you want to start to think about, like, based on that information about the natural systems, you want to think about where you might just start to place some of your key elements. So I wanted to keep some wild areas, so that's zone 5, and some of the close to home gardens you want to keep right close to the house, and the chickens are close to the house too, just for ease of access. So you start to do a very general layout of your property. And then from that information you can start to put together a few bigger picture concepts of placement of a bit more specific details. So I wanted to have a pond, and I wanted to locate my vegetable garden where the best soils were. And then finally you want to do a detailed property plan, and that's where you pull all the pieces together. Your understanding of the natural systems and the types of soil you have, what your goals are for the property. You want to know what your ultimate purpose is as well. So I've got the main gardens, I've got water supply, and the buildings are located on shale, and the gardens have got, and the orchard is located where all the best soils are. So that's it in a nutshell.
I'm going to plant some asparagus crowns in these raised beds. I bought 25 crowns of asparagus, which seemed to be a sufficient amount for a family of 4. So this is what they look like. This is the crown. So this is where the asparagus will develop at the top of the soil, and these are these long tentacle-like roots. They really can't sit in waterlogged soil over the winter. So in their dormant season, they need to still be in a well-drained soil. So once you get your hole dug, you can put your fertilizers or rock phosphate if you got some. I have fishbone meal and alfalfa pellets. Then you're making a mound up in the very bottom of the hole that will come up hopefully around the length of the roots, and sit the asparagus crown with its roots splayed out around your cone, and then backfill the hole with your soil, and so that the crown is about 2 to 3 inches below the surface. So there's my crown there, and surface level will be about like that. So I've got 6 more to plant in this bed and 12 to put in the other bed, and then I'll make sure to thoroughly water everything. So this spring and next spring, I will remember to let the asparagus spears go to seed and not harvest them, so that it gives the plant time to establish a very strong and solid root system.
And then I will look forward to eating lots of asparagus starting in 2023.